Now, getting back to this Mardi Gras, I have up right now a beautiful-looking Mardi Gras kit picture that you sent me. Why don't you tell me about this set? It looks like it has. I don't know if that's a Dynasonic or not, but why don't you tell me about that set?
Oh, I just have the soft spot of any time there's anything Mardi Gras that I can find. I just sort of gravitate to it and I try to get it. So back in the time that drum set was made, most Rogers bass drums were 20s.
Right.
So they would have the headliner set, which is a 20-12-16.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the drawn brass lugs, which are notorious for breaking.
The notorious bread and butter lugs, right?
Yeah, I think I have two snare drums. I have two 20-inch bass drums, 12 and 13-inch mounted toms. I have two 16s and a 14, and one of the 16s has the reversible pedal, so it can be used as a cocktail drum, and you can mount the 12 on it, and the snare drum. Yeah.
Where'd you find that?
Oh, Jim, that's where I'm going to be really bad for you, because this goes back over 25 years, and I bought stuff everywhere. I would go on vacation and just pull in music stores or call them and say, "Do you have any old American drums to sell?" And I bought stuff all over. I bought stuff in Canada. I bought stuff in Spain and shipped it back. Just whatever.
Well, how about England? Is it that what I see this Dave Clark set here? Now we all know that Dave Clark was an endorser for Rogers, but there's a little story behind him. I think there was some controversy as to whether he should really be included in these catalogs. But why don't you tell us about this Dave Clark set that you've got here? Was it a Londoner or?
Well, I'm old enough that the Dave Clark Five was the second English band over, and they were on the Ed Sullivan Show, which was about the only thing kids had a chance to watch live acts on, and they were on more times than the Beatles. But I remember when they came over, and I was taking drum lessons, and I had a faint picture of the drum set. And I went to talk to my teacher, and I couldn't read what the name was. It just had a big R. And I said, "I don't know what the name of this drum is, but it's got a big R." He says, "Well, it's probably Rogers." So I thought, well, I want to know about Rogers then, because Dave Clark plays him. And he had no visible tom holder. Now, back in '64, most bands played one tom-tom, one up,
right,
floor tom. And so Dave shows up with two tom-toms on his bass drum, and I cannot figure out how they're mounted. Well, found out later that what he did was he had two single Swivomatic holders behind the tom-toms, and so I could see them bounce up and down, but I know they were held. And so I had just, for fun, done a set. When I say replica set, it looks exactly like Keith Moon's set before he went to Pictures of Lily. He played a single Red Sparkle premiere set with two 8x14 tom-toms, and I thought, I'm going to find 8x14 tom. I've known that size for a long time. It looks completely weird.
8x14.
Rough with 8x12s and 9x13s. It just looks weird, but I know that's the size, and I'm going to find it. So I finally found him, got the set built, looked at it, and went, yeah, that looks exactly like Keith Moon played. And I saw him play the Pictures of Lily set live, and the guy was a maniac, and I just really loved him, and I didn't want to destroy my drums, or I would have done the exact same thing he did. I thought that was so cool.
Plus, we see it. Go ahead.
But I got it done. I got the set done. I said, I'm going to do a Dave Clark set now. Well, I had all the drums. I mean, I had the tom-toms and the floor tom, and I had a 20-inch bass drum, but I didn't have one that had the right Swivomatic mounts on it, and I didn't want to drill any more holes in anything. So for probably 2 years, I kept looking at Bobby at the Drum Farm's website. Now,
talking about Bobby Jason?
Yeah, Bobby and I don't think I've ever talked, but we have corresponded a lot. And I kept looking, and he had the exact bass drum that had the exact mountings on it. And
Wouldn't you know it?
I kept thinking, I wonder if his price is ever going to go down. I wonder if his price is ever going to go down. Well, for 2 years, the price didn't go down, and I finally went, screw it, I'm going to buy it. So I bought the drum, and he was a great guy. He's a great guy, and I told him that it was fun to deal with him and, get that. And so I had the sign company that I use that makes the logo heads. I had them copy the Dave Clark logo exact. So anytime Dave Clark wants to come over and play a set that looks an awful like the one he had on the Ed Sullivan Show, he's more than happy. I can't offer Keith Moon to come over, but I can still offer Dave.
No. I also see what looks to be is this a Silver Sparkle headliner here?
I have so many Silver Sparkle Rogers sets. I've got bass drums in 20, 22, 24. I don't even know how many 8x12s, 9x13s I have. I must have probably 4 16x16s.
So much Rogers here. It's funny that I would connect you with Leedy the way I have, but I see now that you're connected with Leedy in a different way. But you're really...
I love Rogers. Yeah. I love Rogers.
Yeah, and they were basically the Cadillac of drums in those days because of their innovative hardware and I guess their shells. What do you think made them so fantastic?
Well, when I was playing in the 60s, Rogers was kind of the wealthy kid's drum. I mean, here's how I can say that. The Swivel-matic pedal was $39.50.
Yep.
The Speed King was $25.
Mm-hmm.
The Dynasonic metal snare drum was $150 when Ludwig's Superphonic was between $88 and $100. Mm. So everything was about 1.5 times. So I started out with my 64 Ludwigs, and I was really happy. They were fine, and the tom holder would give way and the tom would fall down and would scratch the drum hoop, and I'd see a Rogers out, and those things never fell. But the thing that really attracted me to Rogers first was I hated my Ludwig hi-hat. I had a flat bass Ludwig hi-hat that rocked. No matter what happened, the damn thing rocked.
Yes.
And I saved up $39.50, which was like $1 million back then, and I went to a music store, and this is about 1965, and I bought a Rogers Swivel-matic hi-hat.
With the swan legs.
2011. I have used that Rogers hi-hat every time I have played since 1965. I've never even oiled the damn thing. I have three backups if I ever need them. But look, I've gotten this far with one, but I got them. I got them if I need them. So I went to the Rogers factory when I was 16, and they were so nice to me, and I was embarrassed because I didn't have Rogers drums. And they gave me the tour, and they started asking. I picked up a 16 floor tom with all its knobby, units on it, and big legs and stuff, and it weighed so much more than my Ludwig 16. And so they asked me about my Rogers drums. I said, well, I have Ludwig drums, but I have a Rogers hi-hat. And they were just great to me. They thought, I'm sure they thought, this is another dumb kid. Oh, well, it's okay.
Now, let's see. What do you think those Ludwig hi-hats stands are going for these days?
Well, not the one I had. But the ones that I've seen things go for $120.
That's what I've seen. Yeah.
And I've laughed about it because the first direct pulls. I understand that. But the one I had, I can't remember the model number right now, but it was where the footboard matched the Speed King, and it would hook on. It would hook on two of the legs, but again, it was flat bass. But because it hooked on, the metal tabs made the thing uneven. That's why they got rid of it and went to the next one. Well, unfortunately, when I got mine in 1964, that's the one they still had, and I hated it from the moment I got it. So that's why I got the Swivel-matic.
And the Swivel-matic bass pedal that I had was the flat bass. It wasn't hinged, and I remember that footboard would constantly become undone and just slide on me. That used to annoy me.
Buddy Rich, to his dying day, played that pedal.
Really? That the one with no hinge?
No, he played the solid footboard, but he played the Rogers Swivel, no matter whose drums he endorsed.
I see.
And in the Smithsonian, in the case, with his drums, is his Swivel-matic pedal. He always used Rogers cymbal arms, and he always used Rogers pedal, no matter who he endorsed.
How cool. Now, let's take a little trip back in time here. Back to the Rob Cook days with his VHS videos. And I'll tell you, and I told you this when I first called you, that I still watch those today. And I always go to the section first of John Aldridge sitting there with a row of Black Beauties, and they talk about all the different patterns. And then I go to your section. You're in that video in the Drum Center of Indianapolis with the glass case full of rare vintage drums. And I want you to tell us about, and believe it or not, folks, he had one of the rarest, well, I think it's one of the rarest drums in the world, but Tell them about the Tom Mills drum.
Sure. Well, any good Ludwig owner in the 60s, by going to music stores, and I said you get catalogs. There was also a little book that Ludwig would produce pretty regularly called My Life at the Drums, and it was Bill Ludwig Sr.'s story about, his childhood, becoming a drummer, and then starting the drum company and the challenges of it. And so if you were a Ludwig man, as they said back then, if you were a Ludwig man, you somewhere along the line got 1, 2, or 110 different copies of My Life at the Drums.
Yeah.
Mr. Ludwig died in about 1979, I think is when he died. I'm not sure the last time they did it, but they did that. It sort of looked like a pamphlet in the beginning. It wasn't a pamphlet; it was a multi-page, but it was narrow, maybe 6 inches by 3 inches, and had pictures in it and stuff. And then, anyway, I don't know how many different versions of that I got, but he told the story of having a wood shell snare drum and performing in Chicago, and Tom Mills, who had been with Sousa's band.
Okay, now there's a tip right there. The John Philip Sousa band, that would put the date at, where would that be?
Turn of the century.
Turn of the century, okay,
stuff. Yeah. So Mills plays what ends up being a Sonor 6x13 snare drum, and you couldn't hear Bill Ludwig outside, but you could hear Tom Mills. So I think the story is Mills got down on his luck, and Bill Ludwig ended up buying that snare drum by getting a pawn ticket from Mills and getting it for like $2, which, at the turn of the century, I don't know what $2 was worth compared to now. But so he brought that drum to Indianapolis and took it to Leedy and said, "You need to make one of these." And the story goes that Eugene Leedy, who was a woodworker his father was a woodworker before him, he said, we make wooden snare drums. We want to make wooden snare drums. And so that was the impetus for Bill Ludwig to go to Chicago. And he had a very talented brother-in-law who worked for International Harvester named Danley. And they made the first Ludwig snare drum, which is a dead-on exact copy of the Tom Mills.
Amazing. Now, at that time, was any company making American company making a metal snare drum?
I don't know. I don't know if any were making, because metal snare drums would have been probably considered, for a lot of people, Marshall drums, for military.
Yeah,
military
some
use.
of the early duplex that I've seen, they have metal shells, but there was something about this Tom Mills drum that is getting the credit for being like the first, or maybe it was just the first for Ludwig.
It had 2 lugs with heavy reinforcement in plates inside the shell to keep the shell from bending, as they would crank the heads. So this was the start of the Ludwig Drum Company. So he talked about the Tom Mills drum. I knew the name, and in about 1989 or 90, I was at Bill's house, Bill Ludwig II's house, in a suburb in Chicago, and he was, this wonderful, gracious guy. I mean, I just really cannot say enough about it. And
it's
so
amazing to be able to say, I was over at his house. That's got to be, what a feeling. I was over at Bill Ludwig's house.
Yeah, I mean, it was just great to have a friendship with somebody who I'd known and admired for a long time, and he was treating me like an equal. So I went to his house, and we had spent the day in Chicago and had lunch and stuff, and went to his house. So we go down to his drum room, and he has all these pedals and snare drums on shelves, and he says, I'm just not really interested in keeping these anymore. And I said, well, Mr. Ludwig, give them to your son. He goes, well, he's not really interested in them either. Now, I'm sure that's probably not the full story. I'm sure Bill III was very interested in those drums. But he just decided, for whatever reason, that he said, I want you to pick out 3 of these drums. And I said, on the one hand, I was very touched. And on the other hand, I was pinching myself that, gosh, this is amazing. I mean, I appreciate the historical perspective of this. And, I got it down to 4. He said pick out three. I was looking at 4 drums. I was looking at the Tom Mills because I knew the historical perspective of that. I looked at the DFS, the Black Beauty that was engraved with the guy's initials.
And we'll get that to that in a minute.
I looked at the William S. Hart drum. We talked about the Triumphal, and I looked at a stipple. And so I decided that if it was going to be 3, I'd leave the stipple out and I'd go with the William S. Hart and the other 2. And so the Tom Mills, the William S. Hart, and the DFS. So after I agreed, I said, Mr. Ludwig, this is wonderful. And he gets out a piece of paper and a pencil, and he starts writing stuff down. I don't know what he's doing. And he goes, well, because you're going to take 3, I'll give you a 10% off. He never said anything about selling them to me. He said, hey, pick 3. I'm sitting there going, he's making me a gift. And then I was so embarrassed. I thought, no. I can't, what am I going to do now? Oh, so he sold me 3 drums, and he said, look, I'm an older man. It'll take me forever to pack these up and get them to you. Just send me a check when you get the drums. And I went, oh okay. So, I drove back to Indianapolis, and 2 days later, the drums showed up.
That quick.